Welcome. I'm Judy with Hope Dementia Ministry, and this is Quality Interaction. Socializing is extremely important for human beings, and especially for people living with dementia. People who are developing dementia often might self-isolate because they're a little nervous about, forgetting words when they're talking or losing track of the conversation, and they feel self-conscious. And so sometimes they just withdraw and they stay at home and they don't want to do social activities. But socializing is extremely important. It's one thing that can bolster the brain and keep people more active longer. So it's important for us to visit with our loved ones who are living with dementia. But a lot of times people don't know how to do that. They get concerned about what if, I can't carry on a conversation? What if they say something and I don't know how to respond? So people get really nervous about socializing, being with someone who has dementia, and they tend to start to stay away. So that causes even more isolation. So this topic wants to give you some ideas, some concrete activities to do with people, and some understanding of what's going on and how you can work with that. All human beings have basic needs. We have need for certainty, which is security, variety. We want something different in our lives now and then. Significance, we want to feel important, at least to someone. Love and connection. Human beings are made to be connected. We're social creatures. And growth. Um, Human beings need to continue to grow throughout their lives. And contribution is another one that people feel better when they're helping other people, when they're making a difference in the world. People want their life to mean something. So let's look at some of these needs in light of the person living with dementia. And the first one is certainty. Certainty is where we say, I have control over my life. I know what's going on. I'm making decisions for myself. I'm laying out my future. Um, and so when people are living with dementia, often this is one of the first things that they start losing because they can't do everything for themselves all the time. They have to let other people have some control. They have to give up independence. Like when you have to give up your car keys because you can't drive anymore, that's usually a big, big blow to people. And so we have to think about what we do with caring for someone with dementia that continues to give them that certainty and security in their life. Another aspect is significance. We want to feel important. Oftentimes, when we have someone living with dementia, we kind of operate around them. If we don't know how to connect with them, they might be seated during a family gathering, but we're not really interacting with them. We're not really connecting with them. Life is sort of revolving around them. People need to feel important, to feel significant. So if you can appeal to that with the loved one that you're caring for, you can often get better cooperation. This whole idea of love and connection, people don't stop needing love when they get older. We think about little children, how we cuddle them and hug them, and we're very affectionate with them. And then as teenagers and young adults, we sort of, go to the handshake rather than the lovey huggy all the time. But people still need that. Adults need hugs. Adults need affection, and especially older adults. If they have lost their partner and they're living alone and they might be alone so much more of the time, they're not getting that human contact. We need to not forget that they need to be hugged. They need to have their hand held. They need to sit close to someone sometimes. And it's not just human interaction that can replace this that they may have lost, but pets play a big role in this as well. If someone has had a pet throughout their life, and if you're a pet owner, you know how they become part of your family, and you can really have a relationship with them. There is interaction that goes on there. So don't forget about pets, the role that they can play in responding to these human needs. And then the last one that I want to talk about is contribution. Everybody needs to have a role. Everybody needs to contribute to family life. So even people living with dementia need to be given a job. They need to be allowed to do things for themselves and for other people. Maybe they can take care of a pet. They can put the food down for the pet. Maybe they can empty the dishwasher. Maybe they can set the table. They should be allowed to do things that they're able to do and be expected to be able to participate in the family life. When we talk about actually communicating with someone that's living with dementia, we need to know some things first off. And I like to talk about setting them up for success. So when you walk into the room, instead of saying, "Hi, do you remember me?" That puts someone on the spot. It's better to set them up for success. Like if I walk in to greet my dad, I would say, "Hi, Dad, it's me, Judy, your only daughter." And I'm giving him clues, telling him who he is, who I am, what his relationship is to me. And so, rather than putting him on the spot and having him try to come up with, "Oh, who is this? What's happening?" That causes so much anxiety. So putting it out there, he might say to me, "I know who you are," and that's okay. That's okay. But if for a second he doesn't recognize me, I want to give him that information that he needs to know. Joining a person's reality is probably the biggest key to interacting with them, to understand what's happening, and to help you relax in your interactions with them. So, what that means is um, being where they are, where they think they are. Their reality may not be the same as our reality. Someone may be well into their 80s, but as they lose their short-term memory, they can't create any more long-term memories. Then they start losing those long-term memories that are the most recent. So someone in their 80s might be living in a space where they think that they are a working person, and they may talk about going to work, or they may talk about their job, or if a friend or a coworker from the past comes to visit, they may ask about work or talk about work. And oftentimes when someone does something like that, our response, our natural response, what we just automatically want to say is, "Oh, no, no, now come on, you remember you're retired. You've been retired for 20 years." And what that's doing is conflicting with what they feel is reality. So it kind of puts them in the twilight zone where they start to feel like, what's going on here? And this can bring on paranoia and frustration and agitation when people are always correcting you and reorienting you to a reality that you don't recognize. So it's far better to be with them. And so, for example, if you do go to visit someone that you worked with and they start talking about work as if you're still working, then go with it. Chit chat about what life used to be when you worked, who was there, what they did, those kinds of things. That can be very good in socializing for the person living with dementia rather than being cut off and no one knows how to talk to them because they can't be in their reality. So it's not good to discuss current events. They can't keep track of what's going on. They might watch the news, they might hear things, but then a short time later, they don't remember what that was. So to be able to follow something like that is very difficult for them. It's much better to talk about things from the old days and taking your cues from the stories that they tell. Often the stories that people tell over and over have a lot to do with where they are in their file cabinet of memories. So when you want to talk about things from the past, ask to hear more. If they're talking about working or whatever, get some more clues from there as to what's happening or where they are, or how old they think their children are, or what they think they're doing or where they think they are, so that you can better be with them in that reality. It's good to sit face to face to a person. When someone gets into advanced dementia, they develop tunnel vision. So they only see what's right in front of them. They don't have all the peripheral. So if you walk into a room and approaching a person from the side, and say you sit down next to them or at a chair off to their side and you start talking to them, they might not even respond to you because they don't realize that you're talking to them. So if you place yourself in front of them, so you're knee to knee, eye to eye across the room, that's very helpful. It also helps with them not having to turn their head. Sometimes older people have stiff neck or neck issues where if they sit and visit with their head turned for a long time, it can be very uncomfortable. But also being face to face with a person is helpful if someone has hearing loss. They need to see your mouth, they need to see your lips move. It's an issue that I have confronted lately with an older friend wearing a mask around her. She has hearing deficit and she just cannot understand people when she can't see their mouth moving. So that's something important to keep in mind. And don't take anything personally. If someone says something that might be true, but it might be rude to say, we have to kind of let it go. If you have gained weight and you're visiting your loved one and they say to you, wow, you look like you've put on some weight, you have to take that and say it's not the person, it's the disease. Because what's happening is their executive functioning part of the brain is breaking down. That's what tells them what is polite or impolite, how they should go outside being dressed. The things that are good to do and not to do out in a social setting. And when that breaks down, they just say whatever comes to their mind. We all think things. And we may look at someone and think, whoa, they've put on a lot of weight. But we know that's not appropriate to say. With the person living with dementia, they can't make those determinations. So something that comes into their mind is going to come out of their mouth. So we have to just kind of let it go, ignore it, and move on. And sometimes that's hard to do, especially if it's a parent or someone who's close to you, you're looking for their approval and they say something in a negative way. It can be damaging, but we have to remember, come back to, we all have these thoughts. It's just that they can't control what's coming out. Playing music is an exceptionally good tool with people living with dementia. Playing music that is from their era, from their personal collection, music that meant something to them, will help to jog old memories. It will take them back. It will help with reminiscing. It will just help them feel better and feel more like themselves, more in connection with themselves, with their old self. And so playing music is something that you should think about doing whenever you're visiting with someone. So some of the other changes that are taking place, I already mentioned visual, like the tunnel vision. Vision does change. A lot of people experience dim vision, which means if the room's not well enough lit up, you might sort of not be clear to them. Your facial features might not be clear to them, so it makes it even harder for them to understand who you are and that sort of thing. So making sure that there's enough light in the room, whether it's artificial lighting or natural lighting, opening curtains, brightening up the environment, that can also tell the brain it's time to be awake, and it releases more chemicals that makes them a little bit more cheerful. Dark rugs on the floor can appear to be holes. So if you're having a hard time getting your loved one to cross the threshold of a door, it might be because there's a black rug there that looks like a hole. Move that rug out of the way and they might be able to cross more easily. Small patterns on clothing. We like to bring people, especially for Christmas, festive clothing with little, reindeers or Christmas trees or wreaths or something like that printed on it. But sometimes people's vision starts to distort small patterns and they can appear to be bugs. So if you've brought your dad a tie that's got some kind of a small pattern on it, it might be distracting to him and it might feel like there's something crawling around on that. Solid colors are a much better thing to if you're giving a gift of clothing, dressing your loved one, think about solid colors. When you can't, I know we're in an unusual time right now with this pandemic. We're not able to get out and do all the things that we used to do, but it's important to continue to take people out. It's important to continue to do your regular routines. Get them to wear a mask so that you can go and walk at the mall, or that you can maybe walk around your neighborhood. You can be out and be in a little bit more social setting, of course, at a distance. If they're not able to wear a mask, if it's not something that they will accept, then maybe you do have to stay at home. But still, keeping them socialized is important. And you can cuddle up on the couch, you can read to them. Reading stories to people is very good, very interesting. If you have raised children and read books to kids, you know you've had your favorites. There's stories that you really like to read. People enjoy hearing those as they age. It takes them back. It reminds them of when their kids were little. So if you are interacting with your parent and there were stories that they read to you, read them their favorite stories. What did they really enjoy reading to you? What did they like sharing with you? That's something that you can share back with them. It's important to honor people's spirituality. If you can get out to church, continue taking them to church. If you're not able to go to church, but that's something that they did regularly, maybe you can find services online or on television, some televised masses or something that they would be able to participate in. Because people build their spiritual life generally from a very young age. And so that's something that is very overwhelming in their life. And especially if they've been very active in their church or in their religious life, it's important to continue to allow them to have those kinds of opportunities. Remaining calm for you as the visitor, as the caregiver, remaining calm is really important. If you get flustered and upset about something that's being said, that energy is going to be perceived by your loved one. They still have that ability to read emotions and show emotions. So if you're upset about something, they're likely to get upset. So take a deep breath, calm down, stay calm, just kind of let, if there's something that flubs up, then it's not that big of a deal. Someone with short-term memory loss will very likely forget by the next time you visit, or even later on in that visit, they'll forget the altercation. So you kind of have to learn to let those things go as well. So there's something that I like to call tough questions and universal answers. People will say things that might really throw you. And how do you react to that is going to determine how the rest of the visit is going to go. So, one of the things that people living with dementia say a lot is, I want to go home. And often this comes out when they're in a new living situation. And so it causes people to feel guilty. Oh, I've moved my mother, I've moved my father. They're not comfortable here. They just want to go home. But I want you to know that a lot of people who are living in their own home, who have lived there for 50 or 60 years, will say, I want to go home. It happens to almost everyone. And what's happening for a lot of them is, so if they've moved to a new living situation, automatically you think they want to go home. But because they say it in their own home, we know that it's more than just that. What's happening is when short-term memory deteriorates, short-term memory is held in the hippocampus of the brain, but that's also where your spatial memory is. And your spatial memory is what tells you this is your house and how the house is laid out and where the bedroom is and where the kitchen is and where the bathroom is. When that spatial memory breaks down, your surroundings, no matter how long you've lived there, start to not feel like home. So when someone says, I want to go home, what they're expressing to you is that they want to be in a place where they know where things are, where they feel comfortable, where they feel in control. So it goes back to this human need of certainty. They want to feel secure and comfortable where they are, and not be wondering, why am I here and my family's not, my children are not here, my mother is not here. Those are the kinds of things that people wonder. So when people say, I want to go home, or when am I going home? The first thing that we want to say to them is, well, this is your new home now. This is where you live now. Or we might say to them, this is your home, Mom. This is where you've lived for 60 years. This is your home. Okay, so that's not the right way to approach it, because obviously we are not being in their reality. If they feel that this space that they are in is not their home, what they're saying is they're not comfortable. So challenging them, saying it is your home, is going to put you at odds. So if you can think about saying to them something like, if they say, well, when am I going home? You might say, well, soon, but before you go, could you help me with something? If your loved one, the person you're visiting, is able to be ambulatory and do things on their own, maybe there's something that you could ask for help with. This appeals to their need for contribution. They need to help someone with something, or their need for significance. If you say to your dad, well, before you go home, could you come outside and help me identify this plant in the garden? I know you know all about plants. I don't know if this is a weed or if I should get rid of this. Could you help me with that? So here you're appealing to their need for contribution. They can help you, and their need for significance. They know a lot about plants. And so that makes them feel better. That makes them forget this whole idea of, I need to go home. I need to go somewhere where I feel comfortable and in control. I can help here. So yes, I can help you with that. If it comes up again, I want to go home, then you can say, well, before you go, would you like to have dinner with us? And so what you're doing is being in agreement with them. You're not conflicting with them, saying, no, you can't go home. You live here now. This is where you have to stay. You can be in agreement with them and say, yes, you can go home. But before you go, can you help me with something? Would you like to have some dessert? Would you like to sit and have dinner? Would you want to watch a show before you go home? And so it's this whole idea of being in agreement, not telling them no, not telling them some reality that doesn't fit with what they're thinking is going on. So another thing, as people um, age backwards through this file cabinet of long-term memories, they may get to a point where they don't recognize their children as older adults. In their mind, their children might be young. And so if someone says to you, where are my kids? And you're one of the kids, and you're like, Mom, I'm right here, right here. I'm your oldest daughter, remember? And that can really throw someone off, because in their reality, in their mind, their kids might be 10 years old. So it's better to ask for a few more details. How old do they think their kids are? Are their kids in school? Well, then you can say they're in school. If they're school age, especially if it's you that they're talking about, what did you do after school? Who was your friend that you went and stayed overnight with? Well, you could say, Judy's staying at Amy's house tonight. Um, and that would make sense. Oh, that's right. That's what, yeah, she stays there a lot. Okay, that makes sense. Or if her children are younger, what if her child is a baby? You know, where is my baby? Oh, the baby is napping right now. Would you like to help me with while the baby is napping? That can redirect, okay, the baby's napping. That's okay. That makes sense. Sure, I'll help or engage in something over here. Keeping people engaged is what can subdue anxiety about, why does their reality not mesh with what they think it is? So, along those same lines, if someone is back in the middle of their life, they might want to go to work. they might need to go to work, especially a man who has been the breadwinner for the family. And when we think about people, in this generation, often it was the man worked and the mom stayed home with the kids, took care of the house. So it was really a lot of responsibility. He had to go to work. He had to provide for his family. And so if it's something that you're telling him now, well, no, you don't need to go to work, that just doesn't mesh with where he is. And so there are some ideas that you can work on to try to create a way that they can go to work. In one living community, they had a really nice setup in the business office. They had a round table that they had set up with papers and envelopes and things like that. And people would come in, residents there from the memory care would come in and they would go to work, and they would sit around this table and they would stuff envelopes, they might staple some things, they might file something. It wasn't real work, but it was something that let them go through the motions of going to work. If they had worked in an office or if they had worked in a social setting, it gave them a social setting to have that feeling of being at work. Another place would, there was a man was just so bent on going to work that they set up a desk out in a social area, and it had a stapler and some drawers and a little file thing. And so he could get ready in the morning and he could go to work and he could sit there and he could do a few things and he could satisfy that need. So when we're thinking about satisfying the needs for people, we have to be a little bit creative. I watched a video where the gentleman, the wife was caring for the husband, and they had professional caregivers in there. He was in a hospital bed and everything, so it was quite late in his disease. But he had to do the show. He had been a clown on a children's show, and they recorded the show every day. And so he had to go to work. He had to do the show. And he was just very agitated because he had to do the show. This was his responsibility. He couldn't let the kids down. So his wife got creative. She took her cell phone and she called the landline, the house phone. Then she would answer the house phone and she would talk on the phone and have this fake conversation in front of him. And she would say, oh, thank you so much for calling. I'll let him know. She'd hang up the phone. He'd be like, well, what was that? And she would say to him, the power is out at the studio, so you can't tape the show today. And his response was, oh, good. I was pretty tired anyway. So it was something that meshed with his reality. He was tired. He didn't really want to go, but it was his responsibility. It was his duty he had to respond to. So when she gave him a reason that he didn't have to do that, he was relieved. Okay, good. That, there was a reason he didn't have to go. It was really interesting. So how about if people are asking for their spouse? Their spouse is deceased, their spouse can't come and visit, but they're wondering where they are. So it's good to give them a reason for the fact that their spouse is not there. Not that their spouse has passed away, because if they're living back in their memory when their spouse was alive, if they feel they are an age when their spouse was alive, to tell them that their spouse has died, that's very disorienting. So you don't want to go there. You might want to say something like, and use the spouse's name, like John is at work, or John is bowling, or John is hunting. What would John have done? What were some of the things that he did away from the house, so that it would make sense to her? And same thing, for if a man is looking for his wife. Well, Jane is grocery shopping, or Jane is teaching. She's at school right now, or Jane is at Bible study. What did Jane do in her life? So it's important to know the person that you're visiting, to know some background. If you are a professional caregiver, you got to get some history on this person so that you can interact with them in a way that makes sense to them. So if a person is talking about where is their mother or where is their father. You know that they are traveling way back in this file cabinet of memories, and they might be feeling like a child, a young child. And to say to them that, well, your mother died years and years ago, that's not something you want to say to a little kid. And so if you think about what would you say to a young child if you had a 7-year-old in your care and they were wondering when their mom was coming to get them, and you didn't know when their mom was coming to get them and their mom was late. You're not going to say to the kid, well, oh my gosh, maybe she was in an accident. That might be what you're thinking, but that's not what you're going to say to the child. You don't want to upset them. So what are you going to say? You're going to give them a reason why mom is late that makes sense, but that's going to calm them down. Well, maybe she's stuck in line at the grocery store. Maybe she's at the red light, something that's going to give them a reason for why she might be delayed. And then once you give them a reason that might be acceptable, you need to redirect their attention. While we're waiting for your mom, why don't we make a batch of cookies? While we're waiting for your mom, why don't we put this puzzle together? While we're waiting for your mom, why don't we watch cartoons on TV? Something that will distract them, will be entertaining and engaging for them, that relieves that anxiety of why am I here and my mom is not here? When is my mom going to be here? You need to respond to that need for security, for certainty. You don't want to say your mom is never coming. You want to give them the idea that yes, she'll be here, don't worry, and to help them set up for feeling more comfortable. Sometimes people live in this alternate memory and we don't know how to respond. And I like to tell a story about a woman who went to visit her mother, and her mother was living in a nursing home. And she walked in one day and her mother was sitting on the bed, and she greeted her and her mother was just beaming, and she said to her daughter, I had a baby today. And she's thinking, okay, you're 85 years old. How do I deal with this? A lot of people would want to say, Mom, clearly you did not have a baby. You're an old lady. So the daughter sat down on the bed and she said, really? Tell me about the baby. Oh, and the mother just went on, she's so beautiful. I just love her so much. Oh, I just can't tell you how wonderful it is to see her face and hold her. And so the woman said, what is her name? And the mother said, Gloria. Well, you know who was sitting on that bed? Gloria, on the day that she was born, talking to her mother. I mean, we don't get that kind of experience. And so to be able to experience with her rather than challenging her and trying to bring her back into our reality, be with her in hers and experience a different part of her life. People get so offended when they feel that their parents have forgotten who they are. And yet to know that her mother still remembers her, but just at a different time and in a different way, it can really be a beautiful thing. So the detective work that has to go on about understanding, what your parent or your spouse's early life was, so that you can interact with them in that world, in that realm, and just, so if it doesn't make any sense what you're talking about, it's human connection for them. They feel important because someone is listening to them and talking to them. And it doesn't matter if it makes any sense, it can be fun. And the other thing that you have to think about is that your visit with someone who's living with dementia is not going to be all conversation, because you might not really be very good at carrying on conversation from something in the past. They may not be able to talk about things that are going on currently. So you have to think about, what would you do if you were spending the day with a 10-year-old? Would you be planning to have only conversation with that child? No. What would you be doing? Activities. So that's kind of the key to spending time with your loved one living with dementia. doing some activities, some things that are fun, things that are engaging. And there's lots of different things for different levels. And I want to let you know about there are booklets that go along with each of these topics. They are available on the website on the educational booklet page. This one lists in lots of detail different activities for different stages. But just to give you some examples, so someone in the early stage, you can do storytelling. You know how reminiscing is like the biggest thing that families do when they get together. They tell stories about, each other and when you were little and what we did and the things we did that mom and dad didn't know about and all that kind of stuff. So to be able to reminisce with someone, you want to be careful about using the word remember. Do you remember when? Because that kind of puts them on the spot. If they don't remember it, then, they maybe don't want to participate. But if you can do the remembering, like starting out a conversation by saying, I remember when I was little and I used to do this and you would come in. So kind of, and even if they don't remember that, it might be a fun thing to hear about, and if it was something funny, they might just enjoy that. But you do the remembering. As people get into the later stages, even, you remembering, might that whole word of remember might be something that can upset people because they don't remember and they get frustrated about not remembering things. So you might want to use the phrase, I was thinking about. I was thinking about when I was little and I had this doll and her name was whatever. Um, that might encourage them to say, well, I was thinking about something that they can still remember. So it's just a way to sort of launch into that sort of reminiscing. But also, if the whole talking thing is not going well, get out and do something. Take a walk. If it's a nice sunny day, sunshine is good for people. It's good for their brains. It's good for regulating circadian rhythm. It's good for making them feel more positive. So walk around, get some fresh air, seeing things that are happening outside. A squirrel might run across the sidewalk and might, give you something to talk about. You might see someone walking a dog, and if your loved one likes animals, that's enjoyable to see that. So getting them out and doing some things. Working puzzles, simple things like folding clothes, that can get people into a rhythm. Someone who has done folding clothes for their whole life will be able to continue to fold clothes well into their dementia. And that might make them feel more connected to themselves. And it's surprising what can happen when people get into a comfortable zone, the talking that can come from that. Toss around a ball, a balloon, a light balloon that's easy to pop around. It won't break anything if it hits something, but it's fun, it's funny, it's exercise. It gets people moving and breathing a little bit more deeply. You can sort things. If someone can't, maybe played cards all their life, but they can't really play the card games anymore, maybe they could sort cards. My dad was always really big on we would play games that would use multiple decks of cards. And when we're done, instead of just leaving them together for the next time, he'd want to sort them all out. So do something like that, or sorting poker chips, or cutting pictures out of magazines to make a collage, something that's an activity that they can be engaged in. And as people progress, you do have to realize that you have to sort of tailor activities to a different level. And so like this booklet that I recommended has lots more detail about the different kinds of things that you can do at different levels. But thinking about enjoyable things, we want people to eat healthy, you know, exercise, that sort of thing. But when you get to a certain point, you might use treats and ice cream and chocolate cake and things like that as a comfort, as a bribe. Not that we just, like throw health out the window, but if it's really something that they crave or that gets them to be more cooperative, don't hesitate to participate in something like that. Again, spiritual activities, fun activities. There's a lots of things that you can do intergenerationally. Like you can take Play-Doh and everybody sit around the table, and little kids and older kids sculpt something. Everybody make a ball. Everybody make a snake, and just see what it comes out to be. Or have somebody make something and try to guess what it is that they've made. There are lots of things that when you're incorporating activities into the day, young kids can participate and older people can participate as well. And that sort of keeps the visit going, and it makes it more vibrant and more enjoyable for everyone. So those are just some ideas for interacting and having quality interaction, making the most of the time that you have together. And I know right now, still in the height of the pandemic, we can't do that kind of thing. We can't get together. Maybe we can engage in some kind of activities over Zoom, trying to be really creative. If you are in your loved one's bubble, you may have to take some extra steps to be involved and creative about activities that you can get them engaged in. And so just keep it going. Remembering that socialization is super important. It's important for the brain. It's important for self-esteem. And so we want to work on engaging as much of as much of that as we possibly can. So thank you for listening. I wish you well. Take care, and I hope to see you again soon.